Hey, welcome to the series of everything you need to know about Python in simplest possible way. In the series of pattern printing, so far we have seen different kind of patterns in our previous videos. This video we will see how we can solve this particular pattern using for loop, string concatenation and also using string multiplication. If you don't know about string concatenation and string multiplication, watch out my first video about pattern printing where I have explained clearly about string concatenation and string multiplication. So now let's go ahead and see how we can solve this particular pattern using all of these things combined together. So for that matter, let's say if you carefully observe this particular pattern, we can actually divide this whole pattern into two patterns and we will solve those two patterns and we will combine them and we will get this whole pattern. So for that what I will be doing is that first I will print this particular above pattern, later I will print this particular below pattern. So by combining these together we can actually get this whole pattern. Having said that, let us go ahead and see how we can get this particular above pattern. So for that reason, if you carefully observe here I am having one, two, three, four, five. Five rows I am having. For that reason, I am taking a number num equal to 5 because I am considering these 5 rows. For that reason, I am taking a number 5. So if you carefully observe here, we have along with stars, we have spaces. We have two different kind of spaces. One is outer spaces which are coming for this particular stars here. So another spaces that we are getting is inside of this particular stars in this particular pattern. So we wanted to identify this particular stars. For that reason, I am taking a variable which is outer outer spaces. Outer spaces will keep track of these particular outer spaces that are present here. So if you carefully observe here, these outer spaces we have, if we have 5 here, we have 4 spaces and 1 stars. For that reason, I am taking the initial value of outer spaces as number minus 1 because out of 5 positions, I am having 1 star and remaining one, 2, 3, 4 are having spaces. For that reason, I am taking the result as the initial value of outer spaces as number minus 1. Because if we change this particular pattern into some other different kind of pattern, let's say 6 rows, at that time we will be having some different spaces here. For that reason, I am taking this number minus 1. So even if the number of rows changes, we will remain this particular outer spaces as fixed as number minus 1. So to keep track of these inner spaces, I will be taking inner spaces as 1. Because why I am taking these inner spaces as because 1 is carefully see here in the first row we don't have any inner spaces, but in the second row we were starting these inner spaces. Because of that reason, I am taking the inner spaces as 1 because this particular second row we are having one space here. For that reason, I am taking this inner spaces initial value as 1. So going ahead, I will use for loop to iterate this particular pattern. So in the for loop, what I am going to mention is for I am taking a variable I am using membership operator. For I in range, to generate a range of value, I am using this particular range function. In this range function, what I will be passing is 1 and number plus 1. So I wanted to iterate the values from 1 till number plus 1. So for that reason, I am mentioning as 1 till num plus 1. So in this for loop, if what we are going to do is that carefully observe here this pattern. In the first row we have 1 star, in the all remaining patterns we have 2 stars. So to identify this particular single star, we need to mention a condition for that single star. So for that reason, what I am doing is that if I equal to 1. Why I'm mentioning is this I equal to 1 is because the first iteration, if I have the I value as 1, if I'm having the first row, at that time I just want to only print this particular single star. For that reason, I am mentioning I as 1. If I equal to 1, what I am doing is that I will print a single star. So before printing single star, what we are having is that we are also having these outer spaces. So for that, first I am doing a space, I will mention space and I will multiply this space with the outer spaces. So later I am concatenating these particular spaces with a single star. So by mentioning this like this, we can actually get this particular single star. Before that single star, we can actually get these spaces. So like this, we can actually print this particular row. So after completion of printing this in this row, what we need to do is that we need to increment this particular outer spaces, because carefully observe here, the outer spaces are keep reducing on each iteration. For that reason, I am mentioning like outer spaces minus equal to 1. By mentioning this, on each iteration, outer spaces will reduced by 1, and we can actually print this particular pattern like this. So for that reason, I am mentioning outer minus 1. So in the else part, what I am mentioning is that if you carefully see here, we have all the patterns having two stars, and before that we have this outer spaces, and in middle we have inner spaces. So for that, what I am doing that I will print. First, what I need to print is that outer spaces. So for that, I am using outer spaces, and I am concatenating these outer spaces with a single star here. So for that, I am using a single star. After completion of this single star, I have inner spaces, right? So here we are having these inner spaces. For that reason, I am multiplying this one single space with the inner spaces. So after that, what I will be doing is that after inner spaces, we are also having this one star, right? So for that reason, I will mention one more star here. So now by mentioning this, we can actually get this kind of a pattern. So after completion of printing this particular row, what we need to do is that here we have outer spaces, and here we have inner spaces. So outer spaces need to be reduced by 1. For that reason, what I will be doing is that outer spaces minus equal to 1. So by mentioning this on each iteration, the outer spaces will be reduced by 1. So what about the inner spaces? If you carefully observe this pattern, in inner spaces, in the second row, we have one space. The third row, we have three spaces. In the fourth row, we have five spaces. So by looking at this pattern, we can actually tell like the spaces of inner spaces is incrementing 2 on each iteration. For that reason, I will mention inner spaces plus equal to 2. By mentioning this, the inner spaces incremented 2 on each iteration. So this is the whole pattern, the whole code that we could get for this particular above pattern. So if I execute this, I can able to get this particular above pattern, right? So you can carefully see here. So now what we need to do is that we have got this above pattern. Now we need to get this below pattern. So to get this below pattern, now we will try to, for that reason, I will take one more for loop. I will use j here. For j in range, I will generate a range of values from number till 0, and on each iteration I wanted to reduce it to -1. So it will reduce by -1. So if I take this number to 0, I will start with this particular row, and I will keep generating. But if you carefully see here, we have already got this particular row, which is a fifth row. So now I just want to start with this particular fourth row itself. So to get start with fourth row itself, I need to skip one row. For that reason, I don't start with a number. I will start with number -1. By mentioning number -1, we are skipping one number, which is of 5 here, and we will start with 4. So I hope you can able to understand. So now what I will be doing is that if you carefully see here, as like in the above pattern in a single star, in the below pattern, we are also having a single star. So how we can handle that is because is that if I mention j equal to 1, so because in this iteration we are starting with 5 and we are keep reducing to 1. So if this j value reached to 1, if this j value equal to 1, I will just print a single star. So for that, I will use first outer spaces, and I will print particular um, single star. So for that reason, I am multiplying these outer spaces. Sorry, I am having this space, and I will multiply this with the outer spaces. So later, I will concatenate these outer spaces with actual single star here. So by mentioning this, we can actually multiply this outer space, concatenate these outer spaces with this single star. So if this condition is failed, so we need to print this particular two star patterns. So for that reason, what I will be doing is that I will mention a else block. In this else block, I will be printing as like the previous one. We first print the outer spaces. I am multiplying this outer spaces and I am concatenating this a single star, and I am again concatenating with this inner stars, inner spaces. So later I will be concatenating this with a single star. So I hope you can able to understand. We have outer spaces and we have a single star and we have inner spaces and we have this particular star at the end. So now what we need to do is that the previous code we are reducing these outer spaces because of this particular pattern keeps reducing. Now what we need to do is that we need to increase these outer spaces because on each iteration these outer spaces are become increased. So for that reason what I will do is that I will mention outer spaces plus equal to 1. So not only this, in this pattern, in this row also, if we got one star, still we need to increase this particular outer space. But as we have reached to the end of this pattern, it doesn't matter whether we increase this outer space or not. But still, if you want, you can increase this outer space 1. So now what about these inner spaces? So the inner spaces also, if you carefully observe, these inner spaces also reducing by 2. As in the previous pattern, it was increased by 2. In this pattern, it was decreased by 2. So for that reason, I will mention inner spaces plus not plus minus equal to 2. So on each iteration, I will reduce these inner spaces by 2. So if I execute this, I might not be able to get the actual pattern. So after the once we see the result, we will if I execute this, I am getting this kind of a not so good looking pattern. So the reason is that here we have two problems here. We are actually using these outer spaces and inner spaces that what we have used for the previous pattern. So for that reason, we are getting this particular thing. So we can actually fix that. So how? Let us see. First, we need to know what are all the values for outer spaces and what is the value for inner spaces, so that we can actually track and can actually fix it. Carefully see here, this outer space became -1. But what we need is that we want this outer space as 1. So for the first is of this particular row here. So for that reason, what we need to do? We need to increment this outer spaces by two values. If we increment to 2, and the first incrementation, the outer space will become 0, and the second increment, the outer space will become 1. So for that reason, what I will be doing is that outer space plus equal to 2. So the outer space will be incremented with 2. So if you carefully see this 9 here, so we don't actually require 9 spaces in middle of this particular pattern. We only require 7 spaces. So for that reason, what I will be doing is that I will mention inner spaces, um, inner spaces minus equal to 2. Not 2, I think 4. Let's see how this happen. So I will comment this 2, and if I execute this, still we are getting some kind of problem because we need to increment this with 4. So if I execute this, we can get this particular pattern. So now I hope you can able to understand this. If not, let me explain quickly one more time how this works. So we are taking 5 rows. So as we require this particular pattern, so later we have observed that in this pattern we have two different spaces. One is inner spaces and another one is outer spaces. For that reason, we have taken outer spaces and inner spaces to keep track of these spaces. In this for loop, we are actually printing this above pattern. We started with one particular range of values generating, and we have mentioned a condition for this space here. By after that, we are getting this particular pattern with of two spaces and two stars in here. So after that, we have observed we need to print this particular below pattern. To print this below pattern, we are using this for loop to below pattern. And in this, to get this single space, we are using a condition if j equal to 1, we are printing a single space. After that, we are printing this particular two-star pattern here by mentioning outer spaces and a single star and inner spaces and a single star. So by combining these together, we are actually getting this whole pattern. Now, what we do need to do is that we will try to take the input dynamically from the user. For that reason, I will mentioning I am asking user to enter any number. Based on the user input, we will print this particular pattern. So if I execute this, it was asking to enter any number. So I will give 5 here. That is what we have previously given. So we can actually get this particular pattern. So if I give some other number, let's say I am giving 9 here. So we can actually get the similar pattern what we have actually tried to print. So if I give one more number, let's say 12, still we can able to get the same pattern that what we have expected. So I hope you have able to understand this particular pattern and how we have printed this particular pattern. The next video we will see how we can print this particular pattern using concatenation and string multiplication. So if you can able to write a solution for this, comment your solution in the comment section. If not, I will discuss this particular solution the next video. I hope you have found this video interesting and I hope you have liked this video. That is to hit the like button and to keep updated with my latest videos, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications. So thank you for watching this video. See you in the next.